The ship's engines hummed softly as the vastness of space unfolded beyond the viewport. Stars, distant and cold, flickered in the inky blackness like ancient witnesses to a world I was yet to fully understand. I leaned against the cool metal of the observation window, the rhythmic pulse of the ship's heart syncing with my own. But it wasn't the engines or the stars that consumed my thoughts. It was her. Amara. I had rescued her once, torn from the wreckage of a ship that had been shattered in an unprovoked attack. Her people, an advanced alien race, were on the run, exiled, hunted by their enemies. I didn't know much about her past, only that she was a survivor, a lone soul drifting in the cosmos, her home reduced to ruins. When I first laid eyes on her lying unconscious in the rubble, I had no idea how much she would change my life. But as time passed, the reality of what I had done began to sink in. She was no longer just the stranger I had pulled from the wreckage. She had become something more, something I couldn't quite define. And in the quiet solitude of the ship, far away from any world I had ever known, I couldn't help but feel a pull toward her that went beyond simple gratitude. She stood beside me now, as silent and mysterious as ever. Her dark, glowing eyes reflected the stars outside, but there was a storm brewing behind them, something deeper and far more complex. She had said once that she owed me her life, but I wasn't sure if that was the whole story. In her eyes, I saw a promise, an unspoken vow that she would repay the debt in ways I couldn't yet fathom. I watched her, wondering if she was still the same alien woman I had rescued, or if, in the days that had followed, something had shifted between us, something that neither of us was yet ready to admit. "What are you thinking?" I asked softly, my voice breaking the stillness between us. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, her gaze swept across the stars, as if searching for answers in the endless expanse. There was a tension in the air, thick and unspoken, a tension that had been building ever since I had taken her aboard my ship. The more I tried to push it aside, the stronger it became. Whatever was happening between us, I knew it was beyond my control. "I owe you," she said, her voice deep and resonant, a melodic hum that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken centuries. "But it's not just gratitude that binds me to you now. It's something far stronger." I turned to face her, trying to read her expression, but it was as unreadable as the dark expanse outside. Her alien features, her ethereal beauty, had once seemed otherworldly to me, but now they felt impossibly familiar. Her presence, like a magnetic force, drew me in with every passing moment. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. "You don't owe me anything, Amara," I replied, though even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were false. "I did what anyone would have done. You'd do the same for me." She stepped closer then, her presence filling the room in a way I had never experienced before. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, the world outside the ship, the stars, the endless void seemed to disappear. It was just the two of us suspended in time. "You saved my life," she said, her voice barely a whisper, though it seemed to reverberate through the ship's metal walls. "But you don't understand, Thomas. The price of that act is far greater than you realize. I will repay it. Not because I have to, but because I am bound to you in ways that neither of us can escape." Her words sent a chill down my spine. There was something ancient, almost sacred in the way she spoke. As if her promise wasn't just a matter of choice, but of fate, of cosmic law. I wanted to say something, anything, to deny the growing knot in my stomach. But the truth was, I didn't understand her. I didn't understand why she felt this. Need to repay me. Why it seemed so much more than just a life saved. I had pulled her from the wreckage of her destroyed ship, yes, but in doing so, I had inadvertently intertwined our destinies in ways I had never expected. She reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine. The touch was soft, but there was a heat to it, an undeniable electricity that surged through my veins. I looked down at our hands, unsure of what this connection was, what it meant. And yet, Deep inside, I knew that we were no longer just two strangers in the vast expanse of space. We were something more, something bound by something far stronger than mere chance. "I will repay you, Thomas," she said again, her voice unwavering. "Whatever it takes." I didn't know what that meant, but the gravity in her tone made me realize one thing. This was only the beginning, and I was no longer sure if I was ready for what lay ahead. Days blended into nights aboard the ship. The soft hum of the engines became a constant companion, a reminder that we were still on our journey, still fleeing the unknown forces that threatened Amara's kind. But while the ship moved through the silent expanse of space, my mind was fixed on something else, the promise she had made. Amara hadn't spoken much since our conversation by the observation window. She was distant, almost too distant, as if something within her had shifted. It was as though she had closed herself off from me, retreating into the hidden corners of her mind, and I couldn't understand why. Her words had been clear, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something she wasn't telling me. I couldn't ignore the knot in my stomach that had only grown tighter since then. Her debt was not just an obligation, it was a force that seemed to have rooted itself in her very being, and no matter how hard I tried to push it away, I knew it would never let go. I sat at the navigation console, fingers idly tapping the holographic interface as the ship drifted toward an uncharted system. The stars outside flickered, distant and untouchable, but my thoughts were consumed by Amara. "You're quiet today," I said, glancing over my shoulder toward the small room where she often spent her time. She was sitting in the corner, her body still and composed, her long black hair cascading like a curtain of midnight around her face. She looked almost ethereal, a being that belonged to no world I knew. "I have been thinking," she replied, her voice as soft as a whisper, yet it carried a weight to it that made my heart skip a beat. "About what?" I asked, turning in my seat to face her fully. Her eyes met mine, and I could see a storm brewing behind them, something fierce and untamable. "About the promise I made," she said, her gaze unwavering. "About what it means to me." I stood up, moving toward her, the distance between us suddenly feeling vast. I had never understood her fully, not her culture, her history, or the meaning of the debt that seemed to bind us. And I needed to understand, for my sake as much as hers. "Amara, I told you," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't owe me anything. I saved you because I couldn't let you die. That's all. I'm not asking for anything in return." Her lips parted as if she was about to say something, but she hesitated. For a moment, she seemed to be wrestling with her words, as if the truth was something too heavy to bear. Then, with a quiet sigh, she spoke again. "You think this is just about your actions," she said, her voice low but filled with a depth I couldn't ignore. "But it isn't. It's about the law of my people, the bond we form when one saves another's life. It's sacred, unbreakable. To refuse that bond would be dishonoring the very fabric of our existence." I felt a chill creep down my spine. Her words were like a veil being lifted, revealing a truth I wasn't prepared for. This wasn't just about saving someone from death. It was about a connection that transcended everything I knew, something far more profound. "You don't have to honor it," I protested, taking a step toward her. "I never wanted anything from you, Amara. I don't even know what this law of yours means. I'm just a human." Her eyes softened, though the intensity remained. She stood slowly, her tall form towering over me, but in a way that made me feel both insignificant and yet somehow grounded in her presence. "It means that I cannot walk away from you," she said softly. "Not until the debt is repaid, until you are safe, until I can protect you." I opened my mouth to protest, but the words caught in my throat. This wasn't a choice. It wasn't even about what I wanted anymore. Amara was bound to me, whether I liked it or not. And she wasn't leaving. Not now. Not until whatever cosmic law had bound her to me had been fulfilled. "What if I don't want to be protected?" I asked, my voice shaky, almost defensive. What if I don't want you to owe me anything? She stepped closer, her eyes never leaving mine. Then you must understand, she said, that your desire to push me away only complicates the bond. It will not break it. I am not leaving you, Thomas. Not now. Not ever. There it was again. The certainty in her voice. A certainty I couldn't escape, no matter how much I wanted to. She had chosen this path, and now I was a part of it, whether I liked it or not. But what if I couldn't handle the responsibility? What if her debt became a burden I couldn't bear? I wasn't sure what to do with this newfound weight, this overwhelming sense of obligation that had settled on my shoulders. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all of this, I confessed quietly, my gaze dropping to the floor. Amara reached out and gently cupped my face with her hand, guiding my gaze back to hers. You don't need to do anything, Thomas. Just be who you are. That is enough. But even as she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that the universe had more in store for us than either of us could have imagined. The days aboard the ship passed in a haze of uncertainty. The unrelenting hum of the engines, the steady motion through the stars, became the backdrop to the growing tension between Amara and me. We were no longer just two survivors on a journey. Now, we were bound by something deeper, something that neither of us fully understood. Though Amara had insisted that she was here to protect me, to repay the debt she felt was owed, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more at play. There was a war raging in the shadows, a conflict that was far beyond what either of us had anticipated. I had saved her life, yes, but in doing so, I had unwittingly dragged her, and myself, into a world that was far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The war between her people and their enemies was only a fraction of the problem. The true danger I was beginning to realize was the forces that moved in the background, the ones who sought to control, to dominate, and to destroy. I sat at the console, staring at the data streaming across the holographic display in front of me. The scans showed nothing unusual, just the empty expanse of space, punctuated by the occasional asteroid belt or distant star system. But I knew better than to trust the surface level of things. Something was coming. Amara, I said, my voice low, trying not to sound too unsettled. We need to talk. About the war. She was sitting across from me, her legs crossed, her posture perfectly still. She had been quiet for days now, ever since we'd spoken last about the bond between us. I could feel the weight of her presence, though she said little. There was an unreadable look in her eyes, something that told me she wasn't just hiding her thoughts, she was guarding them, locking them away from me. I told you before, Thomas, she said softly, her eyes meeting mine. You don't need to worry about the war. You don't need to understand the intricacies of my people's struggles. My debt to you has nothing to do with the war. I felt a bitter edge in her tone, as if she were saying the words more to convince herself than to comfort me. I clenched my jaw. But that's just it, Amara. You keep saying you're here to protect me, but I don't think you're telling me everything. I've been seeing the signs, the way you react when we pass certain systems, the way you glance over the sensors when they pick up a signal. She didn't flinch, but there was something in her eyes that gave me pause, a flicker, quick as a comet, before it disappeared into the dark recesses of her mind. I don't understand, I continued, my voice rising with frustration. Why not tell me everything? Why keep secrets from me? We're in this together, aren't we? Amara stood abruptly, her movement so swift that I didn't have time to react. She crossed the room and pressed her hand against the viewport, looking out at the endless void. Her form was silhouetted against the stars, a dark figure lost in the vastness of space. You don't understand, she said quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the engines. You have no idea what it means to be a part of this war. The decisions we make, the sacrifices we are forced to endure, they are not choices. They are the only way to survive. And now that you are involved, you must understand that you are no longer just a bystander. You are a target. My heart skipped a beat. A target, I echoed, stepping toward her. By who? What are you talking about? She didn't turn to face me, but I could see the tension in her posture, the way her shoulders were rigid with an emotion I couldn't place. The war is not just about my people and their enemies. There are others. Forces that seek to control not just our worlds, but yours too. Forces that would stop at nothing to wipe out anyone who stands in their way. And now, Thomas, you have become a part of their plan. I stepped back, trying to process what she was saying. This wasn't just a war between two alien races. It was something much bigger, much more dangerous. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I asked, my voice low, barely above a whisper. I couldn't, she replied, finally turning to face me. Her eyes were filled with a deep, sorrowful intensity. Because the truth would change everything. I thought I could keep you safe, but now I see the truth. They know you're here, and they will come for you. A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to deny it, to tell myself that it was just paranoia, that this was all just a consequence of our journey. But deep down, I knew she was right. There were forces out there that I couldn't see, forces that would stop at nothing to find us, to find me. What do we do? I asked, my voice shaking slightly. How do we fight something we can't even see? Amara's expression hardened, and for the first time, I saw the weight of the past years in her eyes. She had seen things I couldn't even imagine, been through battles that had shaped her into the person standing in front of me now. We survive, she said firmly. That's all we can do. And together we'll make sure they don't win. But as I looked at her, I realized something. This war wasn't just about survival. It was about something much bigger. Something that would change the course of everything we knew. I was no longer just a man caught in the middle of an alien conflict. I was a player in a game that spanned galaxies, where the stakes were higher than life itself, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. The days that followed felt like a haze of constant motion, a whirlwind of activity and uncertainty. The ship's engines thrummed with a low, steady hum, and I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on us both. Amara had barely spoken since that conversation. She was preoccupied, her mind seemingly light years away, caught in a web of thoughts that she refused to share. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. Amara had always been elusive, but now there was a cold distance between us that hadn't been there before. I couldn't tell if it was the weight of the war or the fear of what was coming, but she had become a stranger to me once again. The bond between us that had grown so strong in the early days was now a fragile thread, stretched thin with every passing hour. I sat alone in the cockpit, the console in front of me flickering with holographic displays as I navigated through the stars. I had learned to read the ship's systems to keep us on course, but it was all becoming routine. The void of space outside had lost its wonder and had become a constant reminder of our isolation. We were no longer just travelers. We were fugitives, running from forces we could not see, but that I knew were getting closer. I glanced over at Amara, sitting in the far corner of the room. She had her eyes closed, but I knew she was far from sleeping. She had been restless for days, her mind spinning, always alert, always on edge. I had caught her looking at the scanners more than once, her expression hard and unreadable. The paranoia was growing, and I could feel it in the air, thick, suffocating, as if something dark was waiting to strike. Amara, I called out, my voice breaking through the silence. We need to talk. She opened her eyes slowly, and her gaze met mine. But there was nothing in her expression, no warmth, no acknowledgement of the bond we once shared. It was as though she had sealed herself off, hiding behind walls I could no longer penetrate. I'm listening, she said softly, but her tone was distant, clipped. I stood up and approached her, unable to shake the feeling that we were on the brink of something terrible. What's going on? You're acting like we're running out of time. Is there something you're not telling me? For a long moment, she said nothing, her eyes narrowing slightly. The weight of her silence was suffocating, and I could feel the tension building. Finally, she spoke. but her voice was cold, controlled. "They're coming," she said simply, her words like a strike of lightning. "I've known this for a while, but now—" She paused, her eyes darting to the scanners. "Now, they've found us." I froze, the blood in my veins turning to ice. "Who?" I managed to ask, my throat dry. "The ones who want to control everything. They know you're here. They've tracked us." My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what she was saying. Who were these people? What did they want with me? Why was I a target in a war I didn't even understand? I was about to ask her more questions when the ship jolted violently, throwing me off balance. The lights flickered and the alarms blared, signaling a system breach. I rushed to the control panel, my heart pounding in my chest. The starboard engine was showing signs of damage. Something was hitting us, something powerful. "Hold on," I shouted, trying to steady the ship as we lurched again. The shaking was getting worse and I knew we were under attack. "What's happening?" Amara was already on her feet, her movements swift and decisive. She was calm in the face of chaos, like someone who had seen this before. "We've been targeted," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "They found us, and they're not going to let us go." I quickly tapped into the ship's external cameras, my hands trembling as the screen flickered to life. A dark, sleek vessel loomed outside, its hull lined with alien insignia. It was clearly not one of Amara's people. The markings were unfamiliar, the shape of the ship unlike anything I had seen before. "This is bad," I muttered, barely able to keep the panic from creeping into my voice. "What do we do?" Amara didn't answer immediately. She was staring at the external feed, her face pale but determined. "We fight," she said, as if it were the only option. I stared at her wide-eyed. "Fight? How do we fight? We're outgunned, outmatched. We don't have a choice," she said, her voice hardening. "You have to trust me." Before I could respond, the ship was jolted again, this time with more force. I could hear the sound of something hitting the hull, the impact rattling the entire vessel. The warning lights flashed, and the alarms grew louder. It was clear that we were being boarded. I reached for the controls, but Amara was already moving, heading for the armory. "Stay here," she commanded, her voice no longer soft or uncertain. "I'll handle this." "Amara, wait!" I called after her, panic rising in my chest. "You can't face them alone." But she was already gone, disappearing into the dark corridors of the ship, her footsteps fading into the distance. I was left standing there, my mind racing with questions and fear. I had saved her once, pulled her from the wreckage of a dying ship. But now it seemed I was the one in danger, and I didn't know if I could save myself. The ship was a cacophony of chaos as the enemy closed in. The sharp sound of footsteps echoed through the metallic corridors, and the alarm lights flashed erratically, bathing everything in red. I stood frozen in the cockpit, my heart hammering against my chest. The cold, distant hum of the ship's engines had long been drowned out by the shrill screech of the alarms and the sounds of combat echoing from the lower decks. I knew I couldn't just sit here and wait for the inevitable. I had to act. I had to do something. I wasn't some helpless civilian anymore. Not with Amara out there, risking everything to protect me. But where was she? Why wasn't she back yet? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. I had never been trained for something like this. I had never expected to find myself in the middle of an intergalactic conflict, with my life hanging by a thread, surrounded by enemies I couldn't even begin to understand. I reached for the ship's comms system, my fingers trembling. "Amara," I called out, my voice crackling through the static. "Amara, do you copy? What's going on out there?" Nothing. Only silence answered me. I cursed under my breath, frustration and fear swirling together in a toxic mix. This wasn't supposed to be my fight. This wasn't what I signed up for when I decided to help her. I had thought I was rescuing a lost soul, a survivor. But now I was caught in a war I couldn't comprehend. I stood up, moving toward the hatch. "Come on, Thomas," I muttered to myself. "Get it together." But as I reached the door, the ship rocked again, this time harder than before. The impact sent me stumbling, and I barely caught myself against the wall. I could hear the sound of gunfire now, distant but unmistakable. The enemy had breached the lower decks. I hesitated for a moment, considering my options. I didn't know what I could do to help. I wasn't a soldier. I wasn't even close to being prepared for this. But the thought of leaving Amara out there, alone, facing an enemy she had warned me about, made something inside me snap. I wasn't going to let her down. I reached for the ship's emergency weapons locker, my hands shaking as I entered the code. It opened with a soft hiss, revealing a sleek alien blaster. I had no idea how to use it, but the sight of it made me feel something I hadn't felt in a while, a sense of purpose. Without thinking, I grabbed the weapon and rushed toward the hatch. The cold steel beneath my feet seemed to echo in the silence of the ship. The closer I got to the source of the gunfire, the more the weight of the situation sank in. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about saving Amara, about protecting the one person who had risked everything for me. I reached the hallway that led to the lower decks, the sounds of combat growing louder with every step. I tightened my grip on the blaster and steeled myself for whatever was waiting on the other side. As I approached the door to the lower level, I heard a loud crash, a heavy, metallic thud, and the unmistakable sound of Amara's voice, sharp and commanding. I didn't hesitate. I slammed my fist against the door, and it slid open with a hiss. What I saw on the other side stopped me in my tracks. Amara was standing in the middle of the corridor, surrounded by 3 large figures in heavy black armor. The enemy soldiers were towering, their weapons drawn, but Amara was unarmed. She stood her ground, her posture as rigid and confident as ever, but I could see the strain in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders. She wasn't backing down. One of the soldiers raised his weapon, aiming directly at her chest. Without thinking, I rushed forward, my heart pounding in my ears. The blaster felt heavy in my hand, but I lifted it instinctively, pointing it at the soldiers. "Drop your weapons!" I shouted, my voice surprisingly steady considering the fear, twisting in my gut. The soldiers froze, their eyes flicking between me and Amara. I could see the hesitation in their movements. These weren't just mindless thugs. They were trained, efficient, and calculating, but I wasn't going to give them the chance to overpower us. "Now!" I demanded, stepping closer. Amara glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she didn't move. She seemed to be weighing her options, as if she were deciding whether or not to trust me. And in that split second, I realized just how much had changed between us. We were no longer 2 strangers thrown together by fate. We were something more. We had become partners in this war, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from us. The lead soldier took a step forward, but I didn't hesitate. I fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the narrow corridor. The soldier's weapon was knocked from his hand, and he stumbled backward in surprise. The other 2 soldiers hesitated for a moment, confusion flashing in their eyes. "Get down!" Amara shouted, pulling me to the side as another burst of gunfire ricocheted off the walls. I didn't need to be told twice. I ducked behind the nearest pillar, my heart racing. The soldiers returned fire, but Amara was already moving. She was faster than I could comprehend, her movements a blur as she disarmed the nearest soldier in a series of precise, lethal moves. I couldn't just stand there. I had to help. I pushed myself up, aiming the blaster again, but before I could fire, the remaining 2 soldiers turned to flee. Amara didn't hesitate. She pursued them, her speed and agility making her a blur in the dark corridor. The sound of the battle faded into the background as I rushed after her, my thoughts a mix of fear and determination. When we reached the end of the hallway, I saw her standing over the fallen bodies of the soldiers. Her breath was steady, but her eyes were cold, focused. She had handled the situation with ease, but there was no time to process it. "They'll send more," she said, her voice firm. "We need to leave, now." I nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. We had fought back, but I knew this was only the beginning, and I had no idea what was waiting for us next. The aftermath of the battle left the ship shaken. but not broken. We had won the skirmish, but the true cost of survival had just begun to sink in. Amara and I had stood together, fighting side by side, but as the dust settled, something inside me began to shift. The calm that followed the chaos felt hollow, empty, like we were just waiting for the next wave to crash down on us. I stood at the ship's main control panel, staring at the blinking alerts. The enemy vessel had retreated for now, but I knew they wouldn't stay gone for long. The warning signs were flashing across the display, detailing the damage to the hull and the critical systems we had barely managed to keep online. The repairs were going to take hours, maybe even days, and we didn't have that kind of time. Amara had returned to her quarters shortly after the battle, disappearing behind the doors without a word. Her silence was heavy, more than just a sign of exhaustion. It was as though something deeper had changed within her. She wasn't just a warrior anymore. She was a woman burdened by her own choices, weighed down by the debts she felt compelled to repay. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had never been in a situation like this. The world I had known, my life on Earth, felt like a distant memory. This was my reality now. War, betrayal, survival. And I was no longer a bystander in this story. I was an active player, whether I wanted to be or not. I couldn't ignore the growing tension between Amara and me. Every time I thought we had found a way to understand one another, it felt like we took a step back. She had saved me once, pulled me out of the wreckage of a life I hadn't even realized was broken. But now, I was the one who was trying to save her, trying to protect her from the very thing she had saved me from. I couldn't protect her. Not fully. Not when the stakes were this high. The soft whirring of the repair drones echoed from the lower decks as I made my way to Amara's quarters. I had to speak with her. I had to understand what was happening to her, what this war had done to her, and what it was doing to us. When I reached her door, I hesitated. I knew she was in there, but I didn't know if she was ready to talk. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure she ever would be. But I had no choice. I pressed the button to open the door, stepping inside. The room was dimly lit, with only the soft glow of the emergency lights casting shadows along the walls. Amara was sitting on the floor, her back against the cold metal wall. Her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her expression was unreadable, distant. "Amara," I said gently, my voice quieter than I intended. "We need to talk." She didn't respond immediately. Her gaze remained fixed on the floor, her mind clearly elsewhere. I moved closer, but I stopped when I saw the way her shoulders were trembling. "You're afraid?" I said softly. It wasn't a question. I could see it in the way she was sitting, the tension in her body that hadn't been there before. Her eyes finally met mine, and I could see the struggle in them, the conflict that had been building inside her since the moment we had set off together. "Fear isn't something I can afford," she said, her voice quiet but laced with bitterness. "It's a weakness." I knelt down beside her, trying to find the words to break through the wall she had built. "It's not weakness," I said. "It's human. And we're both human now. Even if you're not from Earth, you're still a part of this world. You're not alone in this." She let out a hollow laugh, her eyes avoiding mine again. "Alone?" she echoed, as though the word had no meaning to her. "I was alone long before I met you, Thomas, and I'll be alone again when this is over. That's the way this works. I was never meant to be saved." I felt a pang in my chest at her words. "You've been through things I can't even imagine," I said softly, "but that doesn't mean you have to face this alone. We're in this together, whether you want to admit it or not." For a long time, she didn't speak. The silence between us grew heavy, but I refused to back down. "Please, Amara," I said quietly. "Tell me what's really going on. I can't protect you if you won't let me in." She finally turned her gaze to me, and for the first time in what felt like days, I saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "You want to protect me?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I don't know if that's possible. Not anymore. Not after everything I've done. I reached out, gently touching her arm. Amara, whatever you've done, it's not the same as who you are now. We all make mistakes. We all have things we wish we could undo. But that doesn't define us. What defines us is what we choose to do now. Her eyes softened as she stared at me, and for a moment I saw the faintest hint of the person I had met weeks ago. The one who had trusted me enough to let me help her, to let me into her life. You're right, she said slowly, the words heavy on her tongue. I can't undo the past, but I can choose how I move forward. I nodded. And I'm here. We'll move forward together. We've made it this far. We can make it through this too. She stood up slowly, brushing off the dust from her clothes. I don't know if I can ever repay what I owe you, Thomas, but I will fight with everything I have to keep you safe. I stood too, placing a hand on her shoulder. You don't owe me anything, Amara, but we owe it to ourselves to see this through. We stood there for a long moment, the silence now, filled with an understanding that had been absent for so long. Whatever lay ahead, we would face it together. And I knew, deep down, that it was going to cost us more than we could imagine. But it was the only way forward. The ship had been in a near constant state of repair since the battle. Systems that had once hummed smoothly were now riddled with errors and damaged components. But the enemy had not waited for us to recover. They had regrouped, and we could feel the weight of their presence pressing down on us as if they were closing in from all sides. Amara and I had been working tirelessly together, both of us learning how to manage the ship's defenses in ways I never thought possible. I'd never been much of a fighter, much less a strategist, but with Amara's guidance, I had begun to understand the urgency of our situation. The world I had known was fading into nothingness, and the only thing that mattered now was survival. But survival was no longer enough. I stood at the control panel, my hands trembling as I scanned the ship's exterior readings. The enemy ship was back, closer than ever before. Its silhouette loomed in the distance, cutting through the stars like a predator stalking its prey. There was no way we could outrun them, not anymore. Amara, I said, my voice heavy with the weight of what was about to happen. It's time. She stepped into the cockpit, her face a mask of determination. She had changed too. No longer the enigmatic, distant woman I had first encountered, but something far more complex, something that mirrored the very world we were now fighting for. The war had taken so much from her, but it had also revealed parts of her I had never expected. And in these last days, I had come to understand the depths of her resolve. I know, she said quietly, her voice strong. I've seen the way they've been tracking us. They'll be here soon. I turned to face her. We can't run anymore, we're going to have to face them. She nodded, the decision already made in her mind. We don't have a choice. The doors to the cockpit slid open, and the atmosphere in the ship shifted. There was no more room for doubt. There was no more waiting for someone else to act. It was just us, two survivors who had been bound by fate, by circumstance, and by a promise that neither of us could escape. We were in this together, and now we would fight together. I've prepared the ship for the final defense, she said, stepping closer to the console and tapping into the systems with ease. We'll have one shot at this. The enemy won't expect us to fight back. I joined her at the console, taking a deep breath. Then let's make it count. Amara activated the defensive shields and the ship hummed to life, a low, pulsing vibration running through the hull. I could feel the energy building, the tension rising as the enemy's ship drew closer. The sensors showed them closing in fast, their weapons primed and ready. They had been tracking us for days, and now it was time to make a stand. We can't outrun them, I said, glancing at the screen. But we can make them think we're weaker than we really are. Amara's lips curled into a faint smile, a dangerous glint in her eyes. That's exactly what I had in mind. She activated the ship's cloaking system, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to vanish. The stars flickered, and the enemy ship passed right by us, unaware that we had stopped moving. We were invisible to them, hidden in the shadows. "Now," I said, my voice low but resolute. Amara released a series of rapid commands and the ship's weapons powered up. I could hear the hum of the energy cells, feel the tension in the air as the ship prepared to unleash everything it had. I wasn't sure if this would be enough to stop them, but we had no other choice. The enemy ship was almost within striking distance now. I could see their ship's massive size on the screens, the faint glow of their weapons preparing for the final blow. But they had no idea what was coming. We weren't just sitting ducks anymore. We had teeth, and we were going to bite. The first blast rang out, the ship's energy weapons firing in perfect synchronization. The enemy ship's shields shimmered under the attack, but they held. They hadn't been expecting this, hadn't been expecting us to strike first. But we weren't done yet. Amara fired again, a precise shot that hit their engine core. The enemy ship lurched, and for a split second, their hull crackled with visible damage. They were slowing down. "We've got them!" I shouted, my heart racing. But Amara wasn't celebrating yet. She was focused, her hands moving swiftly over the controls, coordinating every move with deadly precision. "We haven't won yet," she said. "Stay sharp." The enemy fired back, the impact sending a violent jolt through our ship. The systems flickered, the lights dimming for a moment, but Amara quickly compensated, redirecting power to the shields. The ship groaned under the pressure, but it held. We weren't going down that easily. "We're not done," she said, her voice fierce. I could see her determination now, clear as day. We were in this for the long haul. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something greater. It was about the promise she had made, to protect me, to fight with everything she had. And now, I was doing the same for her. We fired again, the ship's weapons finding their mark with unerring accuracy. The enemy ship's hull was cracking, now their shields weakening. With each blast, we were chipping away at their defenses. They were no longer the predators, we were. We had become the hunters, and then, with a final, powerful strike, the enemy's ship erupted in a brilliant burst of light, sending debris flying into space. Their vessel was gone, destroyed. I exhaled, not realizing I had been holding my breath. The fight was over, but the war wasn't. The feeling of victory was fleeting, but in that moment, we had won. Amara turned to me, a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. "We did it," she said simply. I nodded, still trying to process everything that had happened. The battle had ended, but we were far from free. There were more enemies out there, and we still had a long road ahead. But we had taken a stand. Together. I looked at her, a sense of gratitude swelling in my chest. "We'll keep fighting," I said, my voice steady. "Together." And for the first time since all of this had started, I truly believed it. No matter what came next, we would face it side by side.